Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Nikki Fried, chair of the Florida Democratic Party. Nikki, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me today.
I appreciate you coming on. You must have had a busy night. You called last night, Tuesday night, historic. Republicans won 2 special congressional elections in the Sunshine State on Tuesday, but with much slimmer margins than they won by in November. You're saying that this is voters already rejecting President Trump's agenda. What is your reaction to the results?
Yeah, so they are historic because these are 2 seats back in November that in Congressional District 6 that Trump won by roughly over 32 points. And Mike Waltz, who is the previous congressman in that area, he also won that seat by 33 points. And Congressional District 6, it was Trump by 36, Matt Gaetz by 36. And so to see that within 3 months, in areas where Democrats have not had the resources, have not organized on the ground, don't have real infrastructure to support our candidates, we were able to, in 3 months, put the work on the ground, get national attention onto these races, and talk about the issues that were important to the people of the state. And that is Social Security, our Medicare, Medicaid, our VA benefits, our veterans who are being fired from the administration. All of these issues were on the ground, and our candidates were talking about those things in particular. And so what we were able to do is move the needle by 16 points in Congressional District 6 and 22 points in Congressional District 1, flipping Escambia County, which hasn't gone blue since 1960. This showed what it was like to actually do the work.
Talk to us exactly about that effort, because in just 3 months, as you said, you moved those margins by double digits there. I had a GOP strategist on earlier, and he said, we were sweating up until Tuesday night. We got the results in. It was a solid win, but we were still sweating. I mean, what did that work look like?
Yeah, and that we actually absolutely made them sweat. You saw polling coming out of both districts, seeing that Republicans were going to be flipping for Democrats, independents were flipping for Democrats, and we had a lot of energy from the Democratic base. But the work meant being on the doors, talking to voters, going in and having those conversations about what is important to you, what is on your mind, what is keeping you up at night. And we built a pretty broad coalition. And so, yeah, Republicans started seeing all of the money that was coming and pouring in from across the country into these districts. They saw that we were talking about issues that were really resonating with the voters. And at the last minute, they had to have Donald Trump calling into the district, having all of their statewide elected Republicans, as well as their members of their congressional delegation, have to do direct-to-cameras and phoning into these districts. And they had to pour in a lot of money at the very end to make sure that they secured these wins. That would have never been dreamed of 4 months ago. And I think it really is a testament to the moment that we are living through as Americans.
Aside from the groundwork that was put in, what else do you think was the biggest factor contributing to this gap being tightened here? Was it the Republican candidates? Was it the Democratic candidates? Or was it President Trump's agenda writ large?
It was a combination of all of it. You had Jimmy Patronis and Randy Fine, who are the Republican candidates and now congressman-elect, didn't campaign. They didn't fundraise. They didn't go into the district. They weren't working. There was no campaign on the ground. And in these districts in particular, they want people to show up for them. They want people who are going to be real, that represents them, that is going to come home and answer questions and fight for them. And so those Republican candidates in particular were not great for these districts. They didn't work them. And on the other hand, it was Trump's agenda. You're seeing in Congressional District 1, there's 4 military bases, a tremendous amount of veterans in those areas. In Congressional District 6, over 60% of that district has some type of federal assistance, whether it is VA benefits, whether it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And the threats to those programs and to our seniors who have spent their entire life working and putting money into Social Security, those issues are really resonating with the voters, that saying maybe this Trump agenda isn't the right one for the American people. And so it was a combination really of all of it.
And these races made Republicans seemingly so nervous that President Trump pulled Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's nomination for UN ambassador last week. I do want to read in a part of an op-ed in Bloomberg this morning. It's entitled "Democrats Wasted Donors' Money in Florida." It also says this: instead of lavishing huge sums on special elections they have no chance of winning, Democrats need to invest for the long term in the Sunshine State. And a Democratic strategist was quoted in the column calling the millions Democrats spent on the races, quote, donor abuse and, quote, an unethical use of resources. What are your thoughts on that characterization of what went on in Florida?
Absolutely not. I think I don't know who wrote all those articles, but certainly as like an absolute mischaracterization of what happened. First of all, these candidates worked really hard. They worked really hard to raise those dollars and put the resources on the ground. This money wasn't spent and wasted on TV. It was spent in communities that haven't had any investment. And so now not only those candidates are leaving money behind for the local party, but they also have trained volunteers. They've trained these local leaders to make sure that we're building the foundation for forward. And of course, as chair of the Florida Democratic Party, I'm always going to want that investment into the party because that gives us an opportunity throughout the year to be organizing across the entire state to make sure that we're working on voter registration. And so these are the resources that came into the state. They were utilized because we worked with the candidates in both of these races. We leaned in with all of our volunteer apparatuses. We trained people. And that is why you're going to see that these investments will not only be able to help, but also look at what happened from these results. The fact that Stefanik was pulled, the fact that Republicans across the entire country that are seeing that they're in R plus 16 or less seats, they're waking up today and saying, oh, maybe not so fast. This Trump agenda may not work for my constituents.
And I would be looking at the numbers if I were them because the numbers are stunning. Waltz and Gates won by over 30. Randy Fine and Jimmy Patronis won by less than half of that. So what do you think Democrats can take from this, learn from this race, and apply it to the midterms?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is you've got to compete everywhere. You've got to put the work on the ground, be talking to your voters consistently year round and talking about the issues that are important to them. And I think that both of these races, and you look at the candidates and their campaigns, they were very focused on what is the needs of their constituents. They weren't, throwing, shade other places. They were really talking about what was important and the issues that really transcended partisan politics. Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, not registered, the cuts to Social Security are going to impact you. If you are a family who has children that's in special needs, that the destruction of the Department of Education is going to impact you. If you are a veteran and you can't get through to the VA for your healthcare needs, that's going to impact you. And so what we can learn from these races across the rest of the country is when you focus on the impacts of the Trump agenda on everyday people, including our farmers, the tariffs today are going to absolutely destroy Florida agriculture. And I think when we start to kind of pull back the layers, be very laser focused on the message and the issues, this is a winning formula for the rest of the nation.
And I think yesterday was probably, arguably, the best day Democrats have seen really since November 5th, because you saw this dent in the gap in Florida in historically red districts yesterday. You're seeing that close a bit. You're seeing in Wisconsin a Democrat-backed candidate for the Supreme Court win. You're also seeing Senator Cory Booker rather. He made the longest speech on the Senate floor. Do you think that this is a flash in the pan for Democrats, or do you think the tide is starting to shift here? Because as you know, they faced an identity crisis. They have faced a popularity crisis. What do you think this looks like?
I think yesterday was a phenomenal day for America and for democracy. What Senator Booker accomplished for 25 hours was not just rambling. He was able to be so laser focused in all those 24 hours, laying out the closing argument of why the Trump administration's policies are in the wrong direction, destroying of our democracy, destroying so many of the safety nets for our communities. And so you saw fight again. You saw that fight, and I think that I saw something that Cory posted later on, or it was an interview later on. It's like, look, the American people weren't waiting for us to be leaders. They were already going into their communities. They were going to these town halls. They were doing the work on the ground, and it was time for him to catch up. And I think that it sent a signal to the rest of the elected Democrats across the country that this is what we need in this moment. We need this fight. And then seeing the electoral wins in Wisconsin, they took on Elon Musk. and they called out the corruption and trying to buy elections and trying to buy the judicial branch. And the people in Wisconsin said, not so fast. Our courts are not for sale. And then the messaging in Florida at the local level with huge movement shifts in our seats. This was a trifecta yesterday of where we are and how we kind of move together. Is there still messaging that we all need to work on? Without a doubt. Is there still an identity crisis that the Democratic Party is undergoing? Yes, but this is a step in the right direction.
I hear just how optimistic you are, and I know we have a long time to go here, but what are you looking out for between now and the midterms, and what does this indicate about the upcoming midterms?
I think that the biggest sign, and I just got off of a pretty large fundraising call with the DNC donors from across the country. I think what this is showing, because people have written off Florida. They've written us off as this ruby red state, as the home of MAGA extremism, and they wrote us off. But what it's showing is that we are going to crawl back. We are going to fight for every single vote. And so today was a wake-up call to the nation, is you can't count Florida out. You've got to invest here. Invest here, not in campaigns all the time, but invest in our infrastructure. Invest in the organizations like the Florida Democratic Party, who is doing the work on the ground, who is making sure that we are hitting all 67 counties, that we're recruiting candidates from school board all the way up to the USs. Count Florida out, and today a showing of that for. We are ready to play and putting resources available.
Nikki Fried, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the time today. You are welcome back anytime. Thanks for the conversation.
Well, thanks for having me.